You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today, and today we have another amazing show line for y'all today. Our guest is Stephen Karbaron. He has spent decades scaling companies and building brands around the world. But over time, he felt the pull towards something deeper. That's when he shifted gears, moving from profit-driven business to purpose-driven transformation. Now, as a certified conscious capitalism consultant and goal mapping coach, Stephen, he works with leaders to align vision with values. His work is about more than strategy. It's about people, purpose, and creating impact that lasts. He's spoken across the globe, advised amazing businesses around the world, and he also lives by 5 simple words: joy, collaboration, integrity, love, and peace. Today, we're going to unpack it all. So without further ado, I want to say to Stephen Karbaron, thank you for your time. How you doing, man?
Good evening or good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are and watching or listening to this podcast. It's lovely to meet you all.
When you think about how you started with your core belief, speak from alignment, not approval, what does that really mean? And kind of break that down for the audience.
The shift for me came after an event that I had attended. We have a time, I suppose, where we look and say, okay, that was the moment. That was the moment that everything changed. But of course, it's not. It's not just one moment. There's always a build-up. There's always other things going on in one's life and around one that are affecting our decision-making and shifting us towards that precipice. Obviously, when we get to the edge of it, we have to make a decision. Do we jump or do we stay where we are, turn around, go back to what was before? So at some point it came to me, I was doing personal development. I've been working on my personal development. Actually, since the early 1980s, I attended my first personal development event. And this has always sort of been something that's been part of my growth, part of my development, both outside and in. And then I attended a few Tony Anthony Robbins events, and this sort of shifted me a little bit more towards where I wanted to go. And it brought me in contact with certain people who then gave me further direction towards a more peaceful way of living, because that was what I felt was my purpose. I came to a decision that my purpose was to bring more peace into my life and the world. And therefore, I started bumping into people, being introduced to people. I think when we put things out into the world, we attract the law of attraction. The right people came into my path, and I started on my new journey, which took in things like meditation, more spiritualism in a broad sense, because I always look at a lot of spiritualism as being confined, but I look at spiritualism as being something that should open us up and not say this way is right or that way is right, but everything is right. That's true spiritualism to me. So yeah, a lot of these discoveries through my journey and different countries that I lived in, worked in, different people that I came across and understood from different realities going on. So really understanding that the number of different realities going on and understanding that they could all be true and live alongside each other and then work together to make the whole truth.
When you think about alignment versus seeking approval, how do you see those two things different, and explain that for the audience in terms of when they're in the public platform versus the boardroom?
Well, following purpose actually is seeking personal approval. So I think, and of course, when we reach that level of personal approval where we fall in love with ourselves and fall in love with our lives and what we do, and that's still a work in progress. That still has to be like everything, like every relationship we have, whether it's with ourselves or with other people. It changes every day, it moves and advances, therefore we have to advance and move with it. But I really think that when we live on purpose, that we actually don't hear the negative thoughts. We don't actually seek approval because there's no need for approval. We know we're on purpose. We know we're doing what we want to do. And as I said, someone else's approval is their truth, not necessarily my truth. So I get this quite a lot with evaluations. I work with Toastmasters, and we do evaluations, and we have several evaluations will come in, and it's quite interesting to see that you do the same speech and different people give you different answers, and sometimes completely the opposite. So one person will say, that was amazing, and another person will say, I didn't quite get that bit, and it's the same part. So when we realize that it's very, very subjective, then we don't need to rely on other people's approval.
I like that part about not relying on it, because when you think about how leaders and organizations, when they speak from approval versus lead with purpose, how much does that carry weight to the audience and how they receive?
Yeah, no, I absolutely. And we see this, as you say, all the time, a lot in leadership of countries, of groups, of whatever, where people are actually thinking about the next vote and not thinking about the last vote. So if we think about the last vote, we made promises and we should stick to those promises. And if we do, people will vote for us again, rather than making new promises and forgetting about the ones that we already made and not coming through on those. And I think that's unfortunately the way of the world at the moment, is that people are always looking in advance and not forgetting what they promised to do.
Once again, listen to I Am Refocused Radio, watching us online, talking to our guest today. Go to his website, Karbaron.com, talking to Stephen Karbaron himself. When you think about a moment where in your own career where you chose alignment, what really starts happening? Because obviously it's not instant growth or instant results, but what triggers you to get to that next level? Because it's an art.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. As I say, there is no precipice to that. It's something that I learnt and I grew with me as I grew in my leadership role. So throughout my career, when I look back, and even actually when I speak to people who've worked with me and worked in my teams and things and get feedback from them about the past, I realized that I was doing a lot of this more purposeful living and looking after people and encouraging and motivating people from long before I really thought about that's something I should be doing and that's the best way to approach leadership. So I was already leading in that way. I'm not being big-headed about it. It's just, it's something probably that we all do. And then we just have to measure it and increase it and say, hang on a minute, yeah, these are the things I'm doing right. These are working for me and my people. And therefore, this is something I need to amplify and work on. And maybe we do it before we realize we're doing it. And that's why actually 360 evaluations and things like this, something that I brought into my working career as a leader, was asking people to judge me and give me feedback so I could improve for them, not for myself, but for them. Obviously, when we improve for other people, we improve for ourselves as well.
That's a great point. You worked across countries, like I said in the intro earlier. Also experienced different cultures and different industries. Have you noticed any common threads? Have you seen how leadership evolves worldwide?
Yes, yes, there are common threads across cultures. I think that leadership, we see various levels of order, various types of leadership, as we know. So the dictatorial leader, the bureaucratic leader, leaders who use tools to control people rather than support people and serve. And this happens all around the world. I think that every country that I've been in, we see leaders who are like that because that seems to be the way that we're taught that leaders have to be, rather than a more conscious way of living, a more conscious way of leading, which is something that I've tapped into and learned through conscious capitalism, that there is another way to lead, and this is through service leadership and understanding that actually leadership is not about me and how powerful I am. It's about my team and my people and how powerful I can make them. And
with that said, have you noticed a or not noticed, but what has been a misconception, if you will, of conscious capitalism, and how do you break that down for people?
So conscious capitalism, as I say, this was something that I discovered along this path of mine when I was getting into meditation groups and things, and post to Tony Robbins events, it was also at a time, a big change in my life. I was just leaving Russia. I'd lived in Russia for 11 years, lived and worked there. I was shifting and moving on to another phase of my life. So a lot of things came into change at that time. And conscious capitalism came along, and it's something, as I say, that really resonated with me. It was when I looked at it, I said, hang on a minute, this isn't teaching me lots of new things. There's new things I'm learning, but it's also reinforcing a lot of things that I already knew, and reinforcing what I've already been doing to an extent, and giving me better, a more direct and understanding way of why it works. So with conscious capitalism, for those who don't know a lot about conscious capitalism, there's 4 tenets to conscious capitalism. There's higher purpose is the leading one. So everyone needs to have a higher purpose and why, a reason why they're doing their business, and it shouldn't just be about money. The second one is conscious leadership. When we become more conscious as leaders, and I think we have to be conscious as leaders to employ the other elements of conscious capitalism in, so it takes conscious leaders to do that. When we become more aware, when we become more caring and more loving about business and the people who work for us, the people we serve, all these people around us, then we start to see shifts and changes. Conscious culture, which is all about what happens within the company, what happens, and how does that resonate out? How do people see the people in the company? Do they see them happy at work? I don't know if you've had this, but I walk into companies around the world. I phone up people, and you can tell whether it's a well-run company or not just by the way people answer you or look at you when you walk in the door. There's are they happy? Do they love their job? Or are they just wishing, waiting for 5 o'clock and the opportunity to drop pens and get out of there? And you can tell the difference between people. So when we do that and produce a decent culture, that resonates out beyond the shop floor, as it were. And then lastly, you have stakeholder orientation. So this is being aware of who does our business touch? Who are we affecting? Not just our workers, not just our clients, but also our service providers, the people our communities, the people who work around us, who service us without us knowing. So all of the different elements that touch our business, are we thinking about them, and we're taking them into some sort of thought when we make decisions? Now, of course, we can't make every decision about any one of those stakeholders, but we can take them all into account when we make big decisions, and the important decisions around them, we can certainly shift towards understanding their needs rather than just the business needs.
Like that, because understanding is an art in itself. It takes listening. It takes some humble pie, but it also gives you leverage, because without those things, good luck. I don't know how far you'll get in life without those things. But my next question is, I said earlier that you have these words. I'm going to remind our audience: love, integrity, peace. Those values, they really help in strategy mode. So when you look at leaders and organizations and how they're able to sustain thriving, because it's one thing to have a nice week, but it's a different story when you can sustain even when the storm comes. How do you see the results when they start to embed those traits in their decision making? Actually, in my experience, having those tools with you, using when they are your core values, when they're real, and this is the important thing. So a lot of people might put in and say, "Oh, yeah, this is my core value," and this is. But if it's not really their core value, if it's not authentically them, then when the storm arises, they can't live by it because it's not them. So they then fall into a different way of acting. These values were really mine, and a great evidence of this was, we all remember 2008. There was a big financial crisis. I'd been working 3 years in Russia. I just had my 2-year
contract renewed for a further year, and we hit crisis. And I was in the purchase department, so therefore all responsibility of all product and everything. It was for an eyewear company in Russia, the biggest retail eyewear company. And a lot of decisions had to be changed. We had to put in strings, finances were poor, everyone was very worried. And I could have just stopped, and I could have just taken the view that, okay, we're going to cut salaries, we're going to be very hard on this, and followed what was coming from above. Or I could have taken the view that I did, that no, went into the boardroom meeting. I said, listen, we've got to consider our staff. This is a difficult time. How can we shift from just turning around to them and saying, okay, you're not going to get pay rises this year, and you're not going to get a bonus this year, and you're not going to get this because the international financial crisis? Or can we find a way? And what I did was suggested that a way that we could give them bonuses that were work related and would give them the opportunity to earn the money that they were expecting, but it was very much work related. And what happened was that my superiors agreed to it. We went forward with it. And of course, our department not only met the expectations, but we surpassed the expectations. And therefore, all my staff ended up getting more money than they were expecting. And we produced more money for the company than they were expecting in a very, very downturn market. And this was all because I believe this was because I gave them support and I gave them care and love. And I wasn't prepared to just turn around and say, everything's going wrong in the world, therefore all my values go out the window and I'm going to just be this brick wall for you right now. I can't work that way.
Once again, listen to I Am Refocused Radio and watching us online or listen to different platforms. I'm talking to our guest today, Stephen Karbaron. Go to his website, karbaron.com. I want to focus and zoom in on the word produce, because that's a very interesting word. Because what I mean by that is when you're working, the quality of that work matters. And the intention of why you do it matters. So when you just share that story about getting through that little storm and end up having results that were increased, that started with the intent of how you were producing. So my next question would be, for someone who's listening to this and they feel like they're misaligned in their leadership at the work, what is the starting point for them to make that change?
Again, I'll go back to what I said. I think the starting point's already happened. So for me, everyone's got all of this within them. So it's not a case of starting, it's the finding point, if you like. So it's where do we start to find and shift from the beliefs that are not letting us go down that direction to the beliefs that allow us to go down a more conscious direction. So I suppose the starting point is awareness. When we become more self-aware, when we become aware of what we're doing, what's inside us, aware of the fact that we've got good and bad inside us, just like everything in the world's got good and bad. We've got, we have good thoughts and bad thoughts. We attract good things and bad things. But the awareness that actually, if we focus on what we really want, if we start to be more positive in our way of thinking, this will attract more of the good things. And actually, what we do, as I said earlier, when I started thinking about world peace, I attracted people who completely changed my trajectory of where I was going in my life. So when we do things, when we really start thinking and focus on something and it becomes part of us, we become aware of it, we will see that that's when the shifts will start. And obviously, like everything, then it's a case of ride the waves, take on board, see what's going on, focus on it more, give it more energy, because we are just energy. Push for that direction and watch the results become more positive. And I'm sure that's what will happen. It's been my experience throughout my life, not just watching myself, but watching other people as well. Those who take positive action, getting positive results. And unfortunately, those who have negative reactions, negative actions and negative thoughts tend to get more negative results.
In the world that we live in, where it's really cutthroat out there, to say the least, what will your message be to CEOs if you had one liner to give them today and say, hey, you're in leadership, it's our responsibility to push what we believe in when we started this company or business. What's a one-liner that you give them to marinate on?
Okay, so my one-liner is it's my one-liner. You just asked me. Always choose collaboration over conflict. Work together. Work as communities. See how we can build something, increase the pie for everybody. Don't always look at how can you chip away at your competitors. Look at how can you support them to support all of you.
I like that answer. I really like that answer because that's a great answer. Let's kind of expand on that because with all the differences we have, different perspectives, different cultures, people raised different, people understand things and learn from things differently. When we start to really be serious about that lifestyle where we want to collaborate with people, what kind of sacrifices would that require? Because in my thinking, in order to help some people, sometimes we have to be less selfish and more willing to sacrifice something, whether it's time, resources. What's your take on that?
I think my take is that we're sacrificing all the time. As you said, we have time, we have resources, we have whatever, and we tend to spend them all the time. So focusing on, okay, what's going to be the bigger picture, not short term, but long term. And I think, this is where a lot of companies and CEOs, I've been there as well. You look at this year's profit and loss figures. You look at what is next quarter's forecast. We work very, very short term in business most times. So for me, I would look at the biggest picture, look at the bigger strategy. And just so one very quick example, as I say, I used to work in the eyewear business. I'm a qualified optician. When I was in the UK, I became very famous in the sunglass area and did a lot of work designing for companies and working with companies. And I remember sitting one time with several of the leaders of the biggest fashion sunglass companies and the biggest brands. And they were all sort of, we were all looking at it. And I brought them together because I said, listen, you all advertising and saying that Ray-Ban's better than Porsche Design, Dolce & Gabbana is better than Calvin Klein, boom, boom, boom. And actually, they're much the same. And, and what you're doing is sitting here and competing, spending all your money competing against each other, really not growing your business at all. Why don't you pool some resources and start marketing sunglasses as the number one fashion accessory? Because your real competitors are the handbags and the shoe shops and the other things that are taking money, the accessories money from, let's face it, men and women go to the shops. They've got a couple of $100 in their pockets. They've only got enough to buy one accessory. Make it the sunglasses. It's the one that everyone sees. Let's focus on how can we make this more important than a new pair of shoes or a new handbag. And they saw that, and they all did a fund, and we all saw the market grow. And we saw, certainly in the UK during that time, during the 90s, sunglasses became very, very fashionable. I'm not saying it was all down to that marketing process, but it certainly helped. It certainly stopped them competing and putting everyone in their own industry down. I mean, this is what I always say. You have Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola, they fight against each other. Actually, they're owned by the same companies. Most of their shares are owned by the same companies, and actually, it's actually just trying to market the soft drinks industry and say which is the better soft drink. So what they're doing is getting you to buy one of the fizzy pops. That's why they always compete directly and speak about each other, because that way you choose which is the best, but you're going to choose between those two.
And wrapping this up, when you think about how some of the biggest brands in the world leave an impact on people, that is a heavy thing to be responsible of and for. So in closing, when we think about alignment and aligning with our values to create that positive space and environment, if you will, what do you hope that the next generation of CEOs will pay more attention to? Because we live in a society, it's about how much can you get, how much can you have, but we don't brag about the impact and the legacy.
Yeah, and I think you just mentioned it there. So the impact and the legacy. I would like to think that CEOs will think longer term, will look beyond this year's or next month's profit loss sheets, budgets and accounts, beyond how, the short-term view of what's going to happen now with this group of people, and look long-term. What's the legacy that we're leaving? What's the impact we're having? How sustainable are we? What's the good and benefit we're bringing? Now, that benefit could be the product, or it could be what we're doing. So, I love, for example, I'm going to give them a big brag because I love them so much, a company called Ecosia. Ecosia are a search engine, and their purpose is to reforest the world. So all of their money, every thought that they do, you can look them up. I use them rather than Google because I love their purpose. And I like the fact that when I do a search with them, I know trees getting planted. It makes me feel good. And I think, if we can find industries and CEOs who say, you know what, my company should not be about people feeling just good about the product I'm selling them. They should feel good about working and buying from my company. That will be an amazing set of CEOs for the future.
I love it. So once again, been listening to Refocused Radio and watching us online, go to our guest's website. Stephen's website is Karbaron.com. Like I always want to say to you, appreciate your time. Be on the show today, man.